So let's start off with the translation of the word emes. And I think the translation of the word emes, and I think it's how the Rambam uses it in context, is reality. Torah is reality, which goes back to our original point. The Torah is it's not a doctrine, it's not theology, it's not a religion. It's a description of a level of reality which is imperceptible in our current state.
So this idea of playing like a guitarist who picks up a guitar
Right.
and doesn't really know how to lose himself in it until he actually knows how to play guitar.
Right.
You don't think that's equivalent to learning Torah? Like somebody who doesn't know any Torah, how can he lose himself in Torah if he doesn't know any Torah? Like, would the more Torah you learn help with the actually being able to lose yourself within Torah and the Ribono Shel Olam and things like that?
Okay, so I think I was thinking playing guitar there's a lot of different dimensions to it. You need certain motor skills. You need a certain rhythmic skill. You need to have a certain feel for the music and the intuition. And I would imagine if you don't ever practice your motor skills, you can't strum, just can't play those notes on the guitar. You just have no idea what it is because it's not intrinsic to you are. It's an additional component of taking from yourself some kind of capacity to fine-tune your motor skills to get there. And until you've done that, so they remain where they are and you're pretty unable to do it, right? I wonder if Torah is the same, and I don't think so. Because there's a surprising Targum Onkelos. The Onkelos who translates the Torah into Aramaic refers to a verse. And the verse says in the last or second last parasha of the Torah, there's this poem called Ha'azinu. And in the poem Ha'azinu, it's Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu saying this poem, and in the poem he's like reflecting on awakening the Jewish people and reminding them of their areas of improvement, and he calls them out on not being appreciative. And the words in Hebrew are Hala Hashem tigmelu zois, to Hashem, this is how you repay him for what he's done for you. Am noval v'loy chacham. You are, and this is how the Arskral translation says it, Am naval, you are a vile nation and you are unwise. Vile and unwise. The word naval, they translate as vile, which is a very kind of tough language.
Yeah.
If you look at the Targum Onkelos, the Aramaic translation, he says the word naval means you received the Torah. So you think, well, one second, vile means that you received the Torah? What's so vile about receiving the Torah? One would think it's a great thing. So if you actually look at the etymology of the word naval, there is a connotation to mean something like vile or despicable. There's another connotation completely, which is from the world of growth. Novel means to wither.
To weather.
Wither.
Wither. Like wither away?
Wither away. When a plant withers away, it means it's become disconnected from its source of nourishment. So it starts to wither. Am Naval means a withered nation. And the Targum Onkelos says, why were you withered? Because you received the Torah. Meaning as follows. We have a source inside of us. We have a fountain of spirituality. We have a soul. Our soul is a spiritual component of our being that has a perception that it sees the world through spiritual eyes, hears spiritual sounds. The problem is when we become dislocated from that source, well, then when Am Naval, then we need the Torah to fill in the gap. In other words, the core the core of who I am, my most fundamental essence, it knows Kol Torah. It learned it in its mother's womb. We learned the entire Torah in our mother's womb. We know it. We know everything, but it's dormant. It's latent. So we have to gain access and bring it, go down there, get into it, discover it. But it's no process of putting on. It's a process of taking off.
It's not a process of putting
Meaning,
on, it's a process of taking off.
Meaning, let's say you want to learn how to play the guitar. You have to go out there and acquire a set of skills. Over here, everything is there already. You just have to stop the barriers from blocking gaining access to it.
So are you saying it's more of, as you learn Torah, you're more scraping off the pieces that are hiding the Torah that's already inside you?
Correct. It's a very different process. You're not gaining any new information. You establishing a cohesion between the information or experience or intuition or knowingness that exists, and you're just trying to get access to it.
So are we saying when Unclus says translates it to withered, is it the Torah's withering away at the things that we need to shed in order for the Torah that's within us to come out?
No.
Because when I hear the word wither, I think like it's withering away, like you're slowly losing it.
Okay, let me clarify. Let's start off with the patriarch, Avram Avinu Abraham. Yes? Mm-hmm. The verse says, Torotai, my Torot. He knew both the Torah written and the oral. And the Gemara said, Avram Avinu, when the angels came, he gave them matzah. It was Pesach. He's keeping Pesach. Well, what do you mean he's keeping Pesach? Pesach, the Jews hadn't even gone into Egypt. And the Gemara says that he kept all halachas. Even the rabbinical halachas Avram Avinu kept. He kept all of the Torah. How did he do it? He never had a Mount Sinai to get the Torah from. How did he do it? The Gemara answers. Mi'atzmei lama Torah. He learned it from himself. His two kidneys became his rabbis, his teachers.
His two kidneys became...
Symbolically, the kidneys are called
like
your...
his gut? Like he had like a gut feeling?
Right. So he intuitively would know how to navigate the world. Torah is not a piece of information. Maybe I'll say this. The way Torah is, right now you're now sitting talking to each other. Mm-hmm. I'm conscious of your presence in the room. And the reason is because visually I can understand, I can see you. Auditory, I can hear you. Thankfully, I can't smell you.
Hey.
I could potentially go and touch you. In fact, there I can touch you. So your presence here is visible. That's in the physical realm. My senses give me input to make me aware.
Second. I'm sorry.
No
problem. Do you need to come in?
Yeah. Rabbi, could just bring his mic a few inches closer to it? That's fine, right there.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny.
So
sorry, you can touch me, you can't smell me.
When there's like the first level of our ability to process an external environment is by using the senses to get a sense of what's outside of me. I don't know what's outside of me. What's outside of me? Oh, I look and I can see. I can hear. I can smell. I can touch. I can taste. So the way I bring the outside world inside, the physical world, is through my physical senses. There's an emotional world. I'm feeling, to a certain degree, your emotions, and you're probably feeling mine. Right now I'm feeling an emotion of curiosity. Underneath the curiosity, I sense a sense of almost a strong need to solve a riddle. It's not a relaxed curiosity, it's a compelling curiosity. Maybe a sense of, just give me the answer.
What's the difference? What's the difference between a relaxed curiosity and a compelling, what's the other word?
Relaxed curiosity is, oh wow, I wonder what these things are for. Like, I'm just inquisitive, and I'm okay if the answer doesn't come to me immediately. I'll live with it. A compelling curiosity is, I need to know the answer. What's going on? I'm feeling that emotion inside of you right now. Right? right? That's in the emotional world. And I picked it up because the way you looked and my own internal emotional receptors can get your emotional receptors, because I've been there as well. So I've got a place for that to land. That's the emotional world. So we've got this, the outer covering or the most overt experience is the physical one. And if I'm out of touch with the physical one, that would be a physical impairment, people who are blind, who are deaf, etc. Then there's an emotional reality that I'm experiencing as well, specifically interacting with people. But even when I'm interacting with the world itself, I've got my own emotional response to the things around me. That's the emotional reality. And it's a reality. The funny thing about an emotional reality is if you don't have an emotional intelligence, awareness, sight, you'll deny it. You'll say, oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
You'll deny what?
You'll deny the experience of the emotional realm. Children can be exceptionally cruel.
Yes.
They
can be very mean.
You'll say to him, Johnny, why did you say that horrible thing to Simon? He said, it wasn't horrible. I just told him he's got a big, fat, ugly face. There's no right? And people who are like neurodivergent sometimes don't get emotional cues.
What's neurodivergent?
People who've got like perhaps on the autistic spectrum, and they can't read emotional clues. Like Temple Grandin's got this great book about how she struggled to just understand what people were trying to say to her. So it's not a given, but if you develop the sensitivity, you can be more and more and more emotionally sighted. Until simply just like being in the room with the person, you can feel where they're at pretty accurately. And someone that's not privy to that world will just say you're making it up. Underneath, if you look at it as layers, so there's a physical universe, there's an emotional universe, there's a spiritual universe. Torah is not a guidebook. Torah is not a set of rules. Torah articulates that invisible reality. And now let's go back to that idea of being withered. Why do we need the Torah to articulate that invisible reality? We should just listen in and pick it up. We shouldn't need to be told these myriad laws of how you observe Shabbos. Should be Friday afternoon, and we should, okay, I know what I have to do now. Ooh, and when I get onto Shabbos, I'm in a different plane.
You're saying it should be like a sixth sense of the sorts.
Correct. That's what Avraham Avinu had. And why? Because he's totally connected with his soul. So he saw the world through his soul. Shlomo Melech says, Solomon the king, Chacham, a wise man, Einov Barosha, his eyes are in his head. The wisest of all men tells us that your eyes are in your head. Where did you think they were? In your elbows? Saying that your eyes aren't here. Your eyes are here. You have to see the world through your insight.
So I guess my question for you, like, how did you personally connect to Torah and like get this almost elevated sense of being able to connect emotionally, whether it's through the Torah or being able to have this connection with other people? Because I feel like it almost takes a certain selflessness to be able to feel another's emotions and be able to receive it properly as well.
Selflessness, I think, is too strong a word, because I don't think I'm selfless. I think more presence. The way I articulate the limitations of our experiencing the world around us is we all see the world through stories, not through metrics. We see the world through stories. And we're always casting people roles and casting ourselves roles. It's just the way we negotiate the world. I'll give you an example. I needed to come here to be on time for this podcast. So I told myself a story. I told myself a story that I'm going to come here. I'm going to park outside the building and I'm going to come up to your studio. I said, is there parking? He said, yeah, there's usually plenty parking on the street. Story in my head, I'm coming here. I've already imagined it. It's happening. Come here, there's going to be plenty of street parking. I just slip into a parking lot. Great. I come here and there's no parking. Like no parking anywhere in the vicinity. The story in my head collapses. that story was an untrue story because it was just generated by my predictive brain. What do I do then? If I realize it was just a story, I say, oh, good way of thinking.
Yeah, but the story was helped along by information that I
Correct.
gave you.
Correct. But it was wrong.
Sorry.
No, it was wrong, right? So this is a trick. Sometimes, or the temptation is to cling on to the story. When I cling onto the story, I say, I can't. Why is there no parking? Well, where's the parking? Well, what do you mean? There was never ever going to be any parking. It was only here. Yes, you had evidence. It was wrong. If I let go of the story and say, I thought it was a story in my head that there was going to be parking. There's not. Let it go. I respond to reality, not to my own self-constructed narrative. When I can let go of the story, I make space for the world. So I can change. It's okay. Well, let me see if I can find parking.
This is interesting because I had an experience when I got back to Israel almost about 4 years ago, where it was something like jarred me, and I came up with this thing in my head where I had to figure out how to fit my subjective reality into the objective reality that is.
Okay.
Does that make sense at all?
I need more details.
So we all grow up differently. We all have our own experiences. We all act differently. We all fit into this world in different mannerisms.
100%.
But yet there is an objective reality that I have to fit into. Like, I can't force necessarily the wills that I want onto you, because you have your own wills that you want. The same way that I could think I can run through a tree, but if I actually run at a tree, I'll bump into it. So there was this almost needing to figure out how to shape how I walk through the world with my own experiences that have shaped me, but also recognize that there's an objective reality of things shaped other people as well, and there are things within the world that I have to come to grips with that can't necessarily change, because I was always trying to kind of shape people around me to make my story rather than
correct. You didn't want to let go of your story.
yeah.
You wanted your story to be connect. In other words,
and you were supposed to do what I wanted
Right.
in order for my story to
right. In
take
other words,
shape.
now that you've come and you see there's no parking, you say, no, there is parking. No, there is parking. No, there's parking, but there's no parking. There is parking, and you can't let go of it. And we know with parking, it's hard to fight the reality because you can't squeeze into no place. But when it's another person, and we project mind reading about what that person is thinking or doing, then it becomes much, much more ambiguous. 100%. In relationships, mind reading and me wanting you to be is that kind of the whole crux of healthy and unhealthy relationships, is how much can I let go of my story and allow you to be you and me to be me. I wouldn't use the word objective reality. I would use the word outside reality, because I think reality is viewed through the eyes of people, and people all standing at different positions and everyone's seeing something different.
Yeah, but we all know that we can't run through trees. I mean, maybe we don't all know that, but the person who thinks they can run through a tree, I'll watch them go and try to run through a tree. I'm going to be like, they're going to hit that tree, because that's just the reality of the outside world beyond me.
Right. So that's true. In other words, everyone's going to run towards the tree, and everyone who thinks they can run through it is going to have a rather unpleasant,
Experience.
kind of painful
Right.
realization. It's a bit like there's in South Africa, there's a funny joke character. His name's Van der Merwe.
What's his?
Van der Merwe.
Fonda Merver?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's like the stupid person that everyone makes jokes about. So a guy goes over to him and says, Van der Merwe, watch this. Puts his hand against a tree. He says, I'll let you hit my hand as hard as you can. Van der Merwe says, okay. Boom. Slams his hand. He moves his hand, hits the tree. The guy laughs. Van der Merwe says, that's a brilliant, brilliant tactic. He goes over to his friend. He says, hit my hand. Yes, Everyone's going to hit the tree. Every single person who hits the tree will experience something different.
Say that again?
There's a shared intersection of reality that everyone that runs towards a tree is going to hit it.
Mm-hmm.
But the experience of running towards a tree and hitting it will be different according to every single human being that does so. One person, it will be the jarring fact that he thought he was going to go through it and now he's just so emotionally broken. For someone else, it will be the pain of his nose hitting the trunk. For someone else, it will be, wow, there's quite a nice smell as my nose kind of wedged between the bark. Everyone's going to have a different experience. So what I mean is there's no objective reality in as much as people experience it. We can only experience things through our own lens. And our own lens, as you said, we've all had different backgrounds. We've got different cognitive abilities, different psychological impacts on us. We see things comparatively. We don't see things objectively.
No.
Right. So that means like right now, if I look at you and I say, well, am I enjoying this? I need to compare it to something else. Well, what am I comparing it to? If I'm comparing it to the last time I was in the African bush. So I say, yeah. If I'm comparing it to the last time I was in the bank, oh, whoa, yes, yes. We see things comparatively. Is this room big or small? Is it cold or warm? Everything's comparative. And we've got different comparisons that we make, and we've got a whole life worth of comparisons. So every person in any moment is having a very different experience to every other person in the world. So we don't want to, the objective reality is we want to be sensitive. That's what I mean. That's what I prefer instead of objective outside. We want to be sensitive to the outside and not try make the inside superimpose itself on the outside. So every time the outside shifts, I shift with it. It's like bending like a reed. A reed's such a brilliant analogy because if you think about it, a reed is a very flimsy plant, one would think. But if you compare what happens to a gigantic oak in a mighty storm, is its very strength becomes its weakness because it's so strong. But then it's not resistant. The wind pushes against it. And if the wind's more powerful than the oak
It's
collapses.
going to go down.
If you're a reed, just bend, and the wind goes straight after you, straight over you. Starts blowing another way, just bend, and you bend. That's going to bend like a reed.
Well, you kind of been this way since I've known you. There's always been like at least from what I see, maybe it's a mask that you put on in yeshiva, but like this calmness to you. Have you always been that way?
No, I don't think so. I'm not always calm, but
you're human.
Yeah, but I think I've learned to be calm, and I suppose one of the ways that I retain calmness is by being able to let go of the story, because the stress comes when you can't let go of the story. I need this to be. I need this to be. I need this to be. When you can let go of it, I don't need anything to be. I need to be responsive to. I think doing Tai Chi has had a big impact on me.
Oh, wow.
Both physiologically and emotionally, because the whole idea of Tai Chi is you never oppose the opponent's movement. You flow with it. So if you punch me, instead of me pushing your fist backwards, I take your fist and I pull it in the direction that's going. And then you resist and I go back with it. So it's this idea of that you flow, you go, you just go, you're always flowing with whatever comes towards you, take that energy and move with the energy. That don't try and make up your own energy. It's not going to work.
So would you say could you apply that to Torah? Like for somebody who like is coming in to learn Torah, we have the reality that has been shaped by our growing up and the environment that we've been around. I mean, you used to work in a yeshiva of Baal Teshuvas. What did you see was the hardest thing for them to let go when it came to accepting Torah as MS? or trying to or trying to show that Torah is emes? Do you believe that Torah is emes? Should we start there?
So let's start off with the translation of the word emes. And I think the translation of the word emes, and I think it's how the Rambam uses it in context, is reality. Torah is reality, which goes back to our original point. The Torah is it's not a doctrine, it's not theology, it's not a religion. It's a description of a level of reality which is imperceptible in our current state because we are withered. We are disconnected from the source of our souls, so therefore we don't have intuitively the capacity to see it as it is. So we need to have a point of re-engagement, and the Torah helps me to re-engage. So it's just telling me what I already know. It's telling me what I already know, but I need it to get there. Otherwise, it just remains dormant and latent. So my experience. Let's start off with starting with my experience with Torah is maybe hard to articulate, but let's start at a more primal stage. My experience of having a sense of a divine protective force around me at all times that I could communicate with at any given moment. I can't remember a time when I didn't feel that way. Before I was religiously observant, there's always a sense of, well, I can just ask Hashem for that. Let me speak to God and see what He says. And it was for sure it was me asking for things, but there was a sense of, and He'll answer me and I'll get that answer. And it was a real kind of, I would have dialogues before I was religious. If I do this, you'll do this. I was like bargaining, and
so God was always like a concept within your life, even before you were
wasn't
religious.
a concept. It was an experience. It was just real.
Yeah.
It wasn't like something that
something you grew up with, or you had an experience that was like, this makes sense.
No, it wasn't. It was not even. It's not in the cognitive realm at all. It wasn't. This makes sense. This is. And I actually thought everyone was like that naively when I was growing up, and therefore I found that people's relationships towards religion quite puzzling because I couldn't get but it's so palpable that Hashem is here the whole time, and even, I suppose the way it expresses itself in davening. So when people say to me when they daven, they feel like they're just reading words and talking to a wall. It's very hard for me to relate to that.
I remember you told me a story that you love shtibels because you could be in the middle of Shemona Esrei and be so in it that there would be a conveyor belt of davening and you would just be in minyan after minyan, just be on that one Shemona Esrei.
Yeah, that's happened. I mean, my tefillah's changed a lot since then in many different ways. But yeah. So it's definitely it's I suppose that's just a part of my essence. So my first contact with Torah was totally intuitive. It wasn't a question. It just was. So Torah in my mind was always right. I didn't know anything. And therefore, as a young boy, as an adolescent, I would intuitively just think, when I learned about something, I just do it. So when I was 14 and I learned a little bit about Shabbos, I started keeping Shabbos. And I didn't know much about it. I didn't know that you had to keep Yomim Tovim, so I just kept Shabbos. So Pesach was like a free-for-all. And then as I grew up, I kind of was just drawn to it. I didn't learn. I never had any knowledge, really. Very, very flimsy knowledge. And what shifted my life dramatically was when I was 19, instead of just doing it out of a reflex almost, I landed up going to a shiur. And it gave me a theoretical framework, which I thought, this is amazing. This stuff actually makes sense logically as well. And my experience of going to that shiur, it was on Derech Hashem, was as if I'd been swimming underwater and then someone gave me goggles and everything became pristinely clear. And once that happened, I kind of dropped everything in my life and just, not physically, but I was in the second year of my fine arts degree, and my passion for arts waned, and I just became enthralled by studying more, and I just couldn't get enough of learning. I just wanted more and more and more. And I snuck into there's in the university I was at, there was a Jewish library. Snuck into the Jewish library, and there were these big books written in Hebrew.
Why was it closed? Why'd you have to sneak into the Jewish library?
Yeah, I just probably liked the idea of sneaking in. It's like, so I'm saying, why do it legitimately when you can go behind the? No, it felt like, like this exploration, this trial. I was going to these big bookshelves and these big leather bound books, and I opened them up, and there was all this, and I could read Hebrew. I went to a kind of a Zionist day school, so my Hebrew language was actually okay, but these books were a mystery to me. I just had no idea what they were talking about. I couldn't decipher them. And I had this passion, I want to know. And that passion, captivated me for the entire year. So my 20th year of life, I was just like doing fine arts, and the fine arts is the kind of degree that you have to be in it, body and soul. It's not like, it's not like accountancy. You're giving over your passion to your work. You're doing a drawing, you're doing a painting, you're doing something, you have to be there. And I was distracted. I was on the spiritual quest. And so towards the end of the year, I realized I can't go on with this. I need to go somewhere. I need to explore this. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to Israel. I'm stopping my degree. Anyway, I thought maybe fine arts isn't the thing for me now with my new direction. So I'll switch. I'll take a year off, and then I'll come back and do a different degree. And so I took a year off. And that was 35 years ago. Probably 36 now.
And you're still here.
And I'm still here.
What got you so hooked? Like, it's almost like I see people, and there are certain people that I'm envious of when it comes to the way they learn Torah and the way they kind of exude this passion for it. Like, it's almost like a thirst that can never be quenched, but continues to be quenched with with everything you learn. And I'm just so curious for these people, like, what is that thirst? What keeps you going? What's the addiction to Torah that just has you leave a degree, has you leave a whole life behind? Because you're not the only person that has these stories. Actors, like people who, huge in other businesses, all of a sudden find Torah and they're like, bye. I just want to check on the time for you.
Okay, 10
It's 11:50.
Okay. Yeah, I've got. That's a great question. It's quite hard to articulate. It's a drive. It's a very, very powerful internal drive. There's a sense of mission and purpose and meaning and fulfillment and importance. There's like the most important thing. There's nothing more important. I'm doing like the most valuable thing that anyone could ever do in the world. So that's extremely engaging. It's like there's something very compelling to wake up for in the morning. This is the most valuable thing you could ever do with your time. And that's a sense. And I suppose as I've developed more and more knowledge, it becomes confirmed and calibrated by what I learn and what I know and then what I experience. And so I'm always getting these insights. And those insights are very, very powerful for me in my life. They give me vision. They give me understanding. They give me comprehension of, well, what's going on in the world around me. And that's deeply satisfying to, I suppose, have clarity that I feel, not obviously in an absolute sense, but having clarity in the process at least. I'll perhaps give you an example to see to illustrate what I mean. Yeah, this could be an example. So just from this week's parasha, last week's parasha, Yehuda comes and he confronts Yosef, who he thinks is this viceroy. And he approaches Yosef and he says, Ki kamocha kapara, you're like Pharaoh. And Rashi says it means, I give you the same honor as I would give to a king. And then he says, or else it means, just like Pharaoh is untrusting, you can't trust him, he's not trustworthy, you're also not trustworthy, you're conniving. Or else it means, just like Pharaoh, not the person who is your master, but someone that lived hundreds of years ago in the time of Avram, was struck by a plague when he captured Sarah, you're going to get struck. Or else it means, I don't care about you or your king, I'll kill you both. Well, whoa. That's quite contrary levels of kind of intention in a single. So you could say, well, the alternatives. He said this or that or that or that. And there's like kind of different versions of what the dialogue was about. Or you could say perhaps there's different layers of the dialogue. On one layer it was, I'm giving you honor and respect. And underneath it is I'm threatening you. And I'm maligning you. And I'm doubting you. And then I thought to myself, yes, for sure. Because conversations happen on multiple levels. And you can be overtly respectful, whereas in the subtext, you're very undermining. That's an example that I'm looking at this dialogue and I'm saying, wow, what a great articulation of what happens in a conversation in life. As a general point. And then obviously there's the specifics of that conversation and it being a key point in a transition in history. I'll give you another example. Yosef goes and seeks his brothers and says, a man found him. Man found him and he said, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my brothers. He says, they're over there. Ready? That was a great part of the narrative that we needed to include. Like, we needed to know how he got there. Why not just say, Yosef went out and they saw him coming. Why'd you need this? And he is found in the field by the man. So Rashi says, no, the man was Gabriel, an archangel. What? Why? How'd that get in there? So the Maharal explains Rashi's intention. He says that Yosef had gone to look for his brothers. He didn't find them. So he's going to turn around and go home. If he would have turned around and gone home, no Egypt, no Joseph, the entire world would be different. So the divine providence sent a crucial player, says VM, who found Yosef. Yosef wasn't looking. He was ready to go back. He found him and he said, what you looking for? And directed him. Okay? Mm-hmm. Lesson for me in life. How many random people have I met that have redirected the course of my life? Whoa. You never know what is going to be the fulcrum, the turning point, the pivot. It can be from this irrelevant, inconsequential conversation that I had or I bumped into. And then with this insight, you see, oh wow, I surrender to a spiritual force. There's something bigger going on than I can anticipate.
There's so much to break down in this. because like I want to ask you like how do you surrender, but I also want to ask like if everybody is supposed to look at themselves as kind of like somebody who has the ability to help shape the course of history,
Yes.
you know?
I mean, we are. Definitely we are. Definitely we do. Every single one of us. To different degrees. But every single one of us, our presence in this world is so powerful. So powerful. Apart from the fact that the Mishnah in Sanhedrin says, Chayav Adam Loimar Bishvili Nivra Olam. A person is obligated to say, the world was created for me. It's not a selfish, egotistical, homocentric vision of the world. It's a recognition of the power of me. That I'm here for a purpose, and without me, the world will not be the same place. So each person in his own way. But my contribution to the trajectory of where the world's going to be is absolutely crucial.
So how do I fit in the fact that if I can say that the world was created for me, also being conscious enough to be able to say that the world is also created for you?
Because the way I understand the context that was created for me was, I have been given a unique mission and purpose to perform that no one else in the world can do. And so have you, and so have you. It's actually the affirmation of my individuated self. And that, by implication, makes room for yours, and his, and his, and hers, and hers.
I wish we had another hour to do this, because I want to ask you, like, if you ran a yeshiva, how would you run your yeshiva?
Wow.
Like that's because my whole thinking, especially with this podcast, and I really hope that a lot of different people find this, because there's so many different ways of learning Torah. I just read, was it Rashi who said this, or there's a midrash that the Torah was given in 70 different languages.
Right. Well, it was when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Israel, he wrote it down in 70 different languages.
I thought Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come into Israel.
Sorry, not when he came to Israel. When the Jews came into Israel, they wrote it down on a pillar of stone in 70 languages. And yes, when Moshe Rabbeinu conveyed it, it says Ba'er Heitev, and he says B'shivim Lashon in 70 languages. Correct.
You know, because I just can't. Everybody's so different. Like, how do you, for the people who aren't the cookie cutter, how do you get them to the people? I mean, there are always places for the cookie cutter people to go.
Right.
You know, but we've both seen. I mean, I think I'm an example. There are just people who, I don't know if it's need something different or need. How do I want to phrase this? Because I don't want to say different direction, because I feel like Torah is its own direction.
To be honest, maybe this helps you to articulate your thought. Rabbi Yochanan Levovitz was the Mashgiach in Mir, an incredible man. I only know of him vicariously through his students. So Rav Wolbe was a student of his, and someone I'm close to, Rabbi Reuven Leuchter, is a student of Rav Wolbe's. So I've read his works, and I've got a sense of like some kind of what he was all about. I remember Rav Wolbe speaking on Rabbi Yerucham's, I think it was his 60th Yortzeit. And he told a story about when he first got to the Mir in Poland, and he was sitting opposite a young man, looked like in his mid-20s, maybe 30, and the man said to him, "How old are you?" He said at the time, I think he was like 20-something. And then you asked the person, he said, "And how old are you?" He said, "I'm 3. He said, "What do you mean you're 3? He said, 3 years ago, I came to the Mir, and I met Rabbi Yerucham. Rabbi Yerucham wasn't an educator. He was Mechayim Mesim. He revived the dead." So Rabbi Yerucham was once with his Rebbe, the Alter of Kelm. And the Alter of Kelm, I think he came to the Mir, and they were in a room together, and the Bochim just heard screaming. The Alter of Kelm was screaming at Rabbi Yerucham. And one of the sentences they picked up was, "Why are you making these people into your Cossacks?" Meaning the Alter of Kelm was critiquing Rabbi Yerucham for not being as perceptive to deal with individuals, and he's trying to make a mold. Never do that. He said, never do that. So I'm assuming that the story of Volby post-dated the story of that conversation. But in other words, systems don't work. Systems don't build people. People need to be built individually through relationships. Relationships build people. We grow through relationships. And therefore, any system is not going to cater for people. It's going to cater for, if there's enough people who intersect in a certain way that they can all get along with this thing, so then they'll be okay. Anyone that's on the extremes will kind of get flushed out.
Yeah, but how are these systems created? Like, do people create their systems based on what's worked for them, so possibly this will work for other people? Or is the system created to try to, or are systems created to try to find what would fit the people that are coming in?
I don't know. I have no idea. That's history. I can tell you from my own personal experience. So I help run a kollel in the afternoon. We've got almost 30 married couples, and in a certain way I've designed a system. The system that I've designed is one where I try to allow people to individuate. I try to create a place where everyone can learn to listen to the other's voice and see their different perspective, and see how what you're experiencing is not what he's experiencing. It's so different. And when you can realize that, you get insight into yourself and insight into him. And and we'll do this through exercises. So we'll set an exercise for people, pay attention when you daven the first bracha in Shemona Esrei. Can you concentrate? And one guy will come back and say, what do you mean? I have no problem concentrating for the entire Shemona Esrei. What do you mean the first bracha? And another guy will say, I don't even know that I said the Shemona Esrei until someone shows me that it must be, because I'm in tefillin abinya from this time to that time, so I must have done something. And then you can say, well, look at you and look at you. And then I'll say to him, well, who's right and who's wrong? And then obviously the answer is, no one's right and no one's wrong. That's Reuven and that's Shimon. Shimon's doing Shimon, Reuven's doing Shimon. Now, how should Shimon grow? Well, let's think about how should Reuven grow? Let's think about it. There is no generic way of growing. Now, this is the bizarre thing. Well, who tells me that? Maybe I'm wrong. Who tells me that? Do you know who tells me that? Apart from it being basic understanding of how we work as human beings, but the Ramchal says it. Reb Moshe Chaim Luzzatto at the end of Mesilas Yesharim, he writes this whole book. If you get to the end of the book, he says, by the way, in this book that I've written, I haven't given you anything in terms of what you should do with your life. I haven't helped you. So you say, well, why haven't you helped me? He says, well, because people are different. I can't write a book for you. I don't know you. You may be living in 2025 and struggling with the challenge of AI and what is the meaning of humanity. Well, I'm not dealing with that in chapter 6. So the Ramchal says at the end of his book, I'm going to give you principles. And now you've got work to do, my friend. You have to figure out how those principles land in your life. And if you're a person who's in kollel, they'll land in this way. And he goes through these examples. He calls him Torasa Umnosa. If you're learning full time, land this way. If you're a businessman, that way. If you're a hired worker, that way. But everyone's doing the same thing, but everyone has to understand how it impacts me. And then he says this shocking phrase, and he says, it could be, Chosid Gomer, a person could be the highest level, he's doing a very menial task, as much as a person whose mouth doesn't stop learning.
Repeat that?
The Ramchal says, I think I'm quoting it.
Next time you come in, I'll bring it.
Okay, I think the quote is like this: it can be oisek b'melacha pchus, a person who's engaged in a basic and menial task, chosid gomer, a complete tzaddik, kemi she lo pasuk pumei megirsa, as much as a person whose mouth doesn't stop learning. They can be on the same level of chasidus, because he's doing him and he's doing him. And he's applying it in his life 100%, and he's applying it in his life. It's not about, there's no objective. Everyone has to be themselves. Bishvili nivra olam. I got to be me. That's all. That's the only person I got to be. And that's radically different. I'm going to teach in every person. So in the koilel, that's the deepest lesson I want to teach them. It's like a little bit, this is quoting Jung, but he says something along the lines of this, not Jung, sorry, Carl Rogers. He says, the paradox of change is that without accepting our imperfection, we can't move forward. Meaning we have to embrace us, me, with all my messed up being. Then I can start to work. So then you get this incredibly liberating permission to just be me. Because if I'm not me, I can't start to move. And me means with all my gunk, and we all have got gunk and baggage and messed up. Like that's one thing, if a person doesn't have any internal, greed, lust, all those things, one thing you can know about that person, or actually two things. Either they're dead or they're an angel. But if you're a human being, that's our birthright.
I really hope I get to have you in again, because there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about. Like, because I have this, like, if the idea of holiness has been corrupted within human society, because we have tzaddikim that we talk about who, like, you'd be like, what do you mean they did that? But we consider them like the holiest people. We can talk about David, but I know you have to go, so I want to ask you the question that I'm going to be asking people at the end of this is, for the yid that's uncomfortable, and uncomfortability, anybody, you can define that however you want to. What advice would you give them?
Number one, embrace the discomfort. Being uncomfortable is not a bad thing. It means that there's a level of profound awareness that you have, and it's a blessing. Because the uncomfortable Jews aren't the problem. The comfortable Jews are the problem. Because they're numb. They don't understand what's going on, because we should all be uncomfortable. There's stuff going on. So it's a blessing. Embrace the discomfort. There's nothing wrong with it. Embrace discomfort. And the way I move forward is by curiously inquiring about myself and the Torah and myself, and recognizing that the Torah, according to Rabbi Yerucham, he says this, he says, the greatest description of my life is the Torah. And the greatest description of the Torah is my life. My life is a commentary on the Torah, and the Torah is a commentary on my life. And when I discover that, then I know I'm getting the right Torah. And until I've discovered that, and I think the Torah is speaking to someone else in a different place with a different mindset, I haven't got there yet. So you can keep on searching until you find that, because it's there.
There's a camera right behind me. Would you like to tell the people where they can find you?
Yes. So you can find me on my website, peretzsegal.com. And I have a podcast called mindmovers.org. You can find me there, or on LinkedIn. And I'd love to be in touch.
Rabbi Segal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This has been off the charts. Really.